This project is putting French doors in this area that separates the office slash mudroom currently from the rest of the house. I scored a set of all wood French doors off Facebook Marketplace. If you try and buy these, heaven forbid brand new, but even used, they are very, very expensive. So I was super excited to pick them up for 20 bucks. Yay! I actually bought the doors after the framing was done, so I had to find a very specific dimension of door to fit in there. I asked the contractor when this place was being framed out what width is standard, and that's the width that was framed to. These are both 24-inch doors, and so it's framed to accommodate that. But you'll notice there's actually no frame existing for the doors, so I'm going to build that. Several years ago, William, for my birthday, took me to a lumber salvage yard, essentially, which I still put down as one of the top 10 birthday gifts of all time. And so this lumber came out of a combination of that for these boards, and then this one actually is from the old house when I replaced the kitchen lighting, and it was the frame for fluorescent lighting, which I hated. But it had these wonderful boards in it, so I saved those. That's why they have kind of a finish on them. So now I have to clean them because they are used, and even these have some nails in them. So I'm going to clean the nails out. All right, my boards are clean. Now I'm ready to rock and roll. So here's where you have to be really careful to do your measuring when you're using salvage lumber. This stuff probably wound up in the lumber scrapyard because it is not 3/4, which is standard width for 1x. I know, shocking, it's not actually 1x. Anyway, so this is 5/8, which is 1/8 less than 3/4. This is a true 3/4 inch board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this across the top, and I'm going to put these on either side of my opening. That is important because when I cut these boards to length, I have to accommodate for the width of this board. All right. I've cut my 2 vertical boards to 81 1/4, and now I'm going to come along and cut this one to length. Now it's a 50-inch opening, and those doors are 24 inches, but they're actually just shy of 24 inches wide. I just measured. And not only that, but I want to make sure that when they open, they've got a little bit of space between them so they don't rub. So I'm actually cutting this one to 49 1/2, which means that I'll have a 1/4 inch on each side to shim it. So I'll have plenty of room to work with, but my doors also won't be crowded. I've laid out my boards here, kind of the way they're going to go in there, because I wanted to make sure I cut my slots for the hinges correctly. So I measured down from the top of the door for all of the hinges, top and bottom, and then I added 1/8 of an inch because I don't want my doors to be hitting at the exact top board all the way across there. And then I double checked the measurement for the hinges before I did my mark. So that is 1 1/8 by 3 1/2. And then I came along here and I scored the outline with my utility knife, and I'll cut out the short sides a little bit as well before I move to the hammer and chisel to cut out the slot for the hinge to fit in. I will spare you the experience that I have hanging these. I will say if you can get a spare set of hands to help you, that is ultra helpful. And then I also like to come along underneath and take a piece of scrap 1x or whatever you can to kind of help yourself out there, but I am not an expert door hanger. These went pretty well, but I will not be making a living with that anytime soon. French doors don't have standard knobs. They're just a dummy. So I picked these up off Amazon. I like this style, plus it's consistent with the rest of the stuff we have in the house. And all I did was took a measurement reference from another door and discovered that the top of my knob is at about 36 inches above the bottom of the door. So then I measured up an additional inch to compensate for the top of this plate here, which is this style. There's lots of different styles of these. And marked my door. So over here you can see the top is going to go right there, and that's actually also going to be the middle point because this is 4 inches wide. So that's 2 inches. So as long as my middle of my top of the plate hits right there, that should look really nice. It should be symmetrical to the other one. And then the other thing to mention is that you want to make sure to pre-drill the holes once you've got the plate mounted where it's going, because of course they give you Phillips head screws to mount this stuff, which is not my favorite, but drilling helps a lot. Now that my doors are hung, it's time to put a strip on this side that'll act as the stop when I pull the door shut. Then once that's done and all nice and square, I can come along and I can drill the holes and install my latches. We all know I am a scrapper, so these pieces came out of a salvage lumber pile, oh gosh, upwards of 7-8 years ago. And I'm excited that I get to put them to use. They'll be perfect. They're a narrow strip and they should fit perfectly on the inside of that jamb. I've marked these for 81 inches, which is the height that I need them to go to. And then I'll come across and stick one at the top in between those two. I considered placing the top one first, but in looking at my existing door jambs, they're all done this way. So I'm just going to continue the pattern. So I just put 4 nails in each one, kind of going down the row here with a finish nailer. Nothing crazy, just to tack it into place. It's not going to undergo any serious strain or anything like that. Now I'm going to measure in between at the top, cut that top board and do the same thing. So my measurement is 46 5/8. I have 2 pieces of waste wood here, and I just want to say that from a salvage lumber perspective, the more often you can use up your shorter board first, then you can keep your longer board for future projects. So this one has, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 inches of length. So I'm going to cut my board out of this one, which will allow me to preserve this longer one for next time. This is what it looks like from inside. And when I close the doors, it stops just as intended. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to put my latches in at the top there so that it stays shut when I shut it. I have these ball style latches, and I had to measure and carve out where they're going to recess in there. If you go and buy a door from the store, it will likely already have these, but these were secondhand, so here we go. I know it looks ugly underneath there, but it's good enough. And since it's at the top, no one will ever see. What I'm going to do now is actually take one of my daughter's oil pastels and mark the top of that ball. Just get really generous with it, because I'm going to use that to mark where I need to drill out the top piece for this portion of it to sit. It's got to have a place to go there, and then it'll just sit right over the top of it like that. Okay, now it is important that you mount it with this kind of curvy piece out, and you can look at any standard door strike plate for reference there. I'm going to close it, and it should drag and color along where I need to mark it, and it sure did. So I can tell now where I need to drill out a little concave housing for that strike plate to sit. I've drilled that out, and before I get too crazy mounting the strike plate, I want to double check that I've got it in the right place, and I sure do. So it's actually catching just like that, but I am going to come along and drill or not drill, but carve that out so it's an oblong shape, because this is an oblong shape. And that way it'll sit there nicely. Now you can, and most people do, recess this the same way I recessed this by carving out a slot for it to fit, but honestly, I don't know that I'm gonna need to do that. So I'm gonna do this part first and then see where we land. Moment of truth. Ta-da! We're staying put. These are adjustable. So before I screwed this down, I did give it a test, and that resulted in me actually extending that ball up just a hair so that it's a more snug fit. But yeah, I'm really happy with that. So on to the next, and I'm just gonna rinse and repeat. And that's a wrap, folks. French doors installed.